All right. Fireside chat, AI with Alec. This is going to be the hardest one, but also the most awesome one because this is Raiza Martin. And if anyone in the world of AI or otherwise has experienced NotebookLM, you know that feeling. That's that ChatGPT feeling. So I'm going to do my best to be quiet and ask questions and let Raiza let it rip because this is an outstanding person, outstanding team. And here we go. So I'm going to start with this, Raiza, because you know these are short, 12, 14-minute conversations. In your words, what is NotebookLM and why are so many people falling in love with it?
Well, NotebookLM is an AI-powered research assistant. And the magic of it is that it's personalized and source-grounded in the material that you give it. It's been really such a big hit of recent time because we released this feature called Audio Overviews, which lets you do exactly what I described, upload your sources to it, and it generates a really engaging audio of that same content. So imagine you upload a 100-slide deck, and now you have an audio of 2 AI hosts talking about it. So that's been really cool.
That is the magic, without a doubt. And so let's double click into it a little bit for the audience. So I'm gonna describe something and then you react, right? So basically what this means is, let's say I had to get real smart real quick for a meeting with a publicly traded, company, and I didn't have more than, 47 minutes. And I would love to have had 47 hours to over prepare. But I don't. And I have a number of annual reports from this company. I have investor presentations, et cetera. So how does NotebookLM help me in that scenario get smart and learn and be better at what I'm going to do in 46 minutes time, thanks to the wonderful technology and interface that you all have built?
That is such a good question. I actually think of NotebookLM as my unofficial chief of staff because I don't have one. I don't have an actual chief of staff, but I'm in back-to-back meetings all day. I have very little time to prep in between these meetings, and I have very little time in general. But one of the things I do is, let's say I'm meeting, this actually happened quite recently. I was meeting with a couple of different CEOs, CMOs, right, from big sort of Fortune 100 companies. And I wanted to do just a little bit of digging, learn more about their business, learn about their initiatives. And what did I do? Did a quick Google search, pulled the top hits, put it into NotebookLM, and I said, okay, generate an audio, and then let me read the summary and let me ask questions while the audio is playing in the background. And that was it. It didn't take more than 10 minutes for each of these calls. And I felt much more confident going into these calls and also much more knowledgeable.
I love that. And let's go a little bit technical because, we talked about there is a decent dimension of my followers that are deeply technical. And let's talk a little bit about the magic, that the infrastructure, the architecture of what makes that happen, right? Because I've watched a couple of your interviews and I love when you talk about the way that the studio itself, there's some magic in there that calibrates the way that those two hosts go back and forth with each other, and down the road, there may be some knobs that you might enable folks to calibrate, but you want to maintain that magic of one click. Tell us a little bit more, just a little bit of the technical side of things for both sides of the audience of how does it do what it does?
So I can't reveal too much of how it does, what it does. Whenever I do these interviews, I'm like, hey,
everyone wants to
know. Actually going to tell you, but I'm going to say something.
I'm going to give you a little directional something.
Yeah. I'm going to give you a little something. I think that here's like my actual take on this, and I want people to take this really seriously. This is a real answer. I think that we are living in this insane moment in time where the technologies are so cutting edge. And it is literally impossible for any such person to always be on the forefront, to always know what the models are capable of, to always sort of know what's going to happen next, that we are sort of not able to do this adjacent track next to the technology track, which is the productization of it, right? Because think about it. Think about all the things that these models can do today. They do more and more every day. But how are we actually connecting them to real people? Right? And I'm not talking about you or me. You or me, we are connected to the technologies every day, right? We are the people reading the papers. We are the people trying to play with these things and try to figure out how to build the tech. But of the actual technology in every day, I think that requires a lot of discipline, a lot of thought, a lot of shaping. And so one thing I will say here to not answer your question, is that that's the approach that we took, which is what is the right combination of existing technologies, cutting edge AI models, some maybe not cutting edge, right, to really bring that to you. And I think that's what product is, right? That's what building products should be.
I love that answer, honestly. And I don't think you need to go any deeper than that because I'm going to follow up with that with the thing that we spoke about, a little bit before with our, legendary Ethan Malik fandom, obviously, one of the best out there on AI Twitter and what have you, along with his blog post this morning that was great. But let's talk about AI tooling in the enterprise and just the human dimension of, like, do you feel like, walk us through, how do you envision that happening in the enterprise today go forward, contextualizing what you just said, which is we're all figuring out as we go?
I mean, from the beginning with NotebookLM, I had this nugget, this notion that, hey, the technology as it continues to advance will transform the way we do work, whether at an individual level, a team level, an enterprise level, and it's ultimately going to revolutionize business outcomes, right? At each layer that we think about it. But one of the things that I encounter on a daily basis, right, as I talk with business leaders, I talk with teams, I talk with individuals, is the main question anybody has is how, right? It's not why. I think we know the why. We're like, oh,
Yeah, we're past the why. It's like, let's
past the
go.
why, which is a phenomenal time, right, to be a builder. But the how is still up in the air. Do I code it myself? Do I build my own thing? Do I just buy the thing from Google? Like, what? How does it even work, right? How do I know that it works? And so I think there's a lot of opportunity here for us to really think about, okay, for a business, what are the things that, one, the business cares about the most? Two, what are the technologies most ready to deliver on? And three, how do you keep advancing from there, right? So I think there's also this sort of like scalability and sort of forward-looking perspective we have to hold at the same time.
I love that. And I think what you're also saying without, saying it, so I'm gonna put some words in your mouth, right, is that this is not just a technology, quote unquote, problem to solve, right? This has got a lot of folks at the table that all need to come to the table with that, humble confidence approach that, hey, we don't have all the answers. This is different, right? This is very different. Now, I read a great quote from Barron's, actually, right, that gave you all they referred to you as a glimpse into the future of AI in the workplace, which I think just nails it in like 5 words. So now let's get super tangible, if you don't mind, because there was a couple conversations and, we're on the same page here and digitally and otherwise, right, is that what you said about your vision for, where NotebookLM ultimately is and where it's going. Let's make it really tangible, right? So let's say there's a bunch of salespeople who are talking to the market, right, all the time, first calls, second calls, what have you. Yeah. And there's a bunch of product people who rely so much on different dimensions of data, including call transcripts, such as those conversations and others. And, one of the things you said in a recent interview, which I thought was so practical and awesome, was like, hey, what if there's a person that's joining a team, right? A salesperson, for example, and yeah, they might want to find some time to read 200 pages of documentation, so on and so forth, but they're also trying to put points on the board. And instead of having to do all of that in a more traditional way, there's an observation of a story, an anecdote, and I don't know if it's a use case or a case study, so I don't want to, again, put words in your mouth, but help the audience understand a scenario. You can use that one, right, with sales or otherwise, but a scenario that's very native to all of us in business, where conversations between various humans, salespeople in the market and otherwise, and transcripts and data and onboarding and all of that stuff can kind of come together, where NotebookLM can kind of 10x that when it's understood. Yeah. And I think that's the magic. I'd love to hear you speak to that a little bit if you could.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. This one, I think, let me talk a little bit about the framework of how I think enterprise AI native tools can succeed, right? So I think there's a big piece of it, which is context, right? And I think that's what you're referring to, which is we're on a team. We have a shared context. We have our technical docs, we have the existing product, we have our website, we have logs of like all of our chats with each other, we have these decision trees, right? Like the historical knowledge of our team is the context. So when we think about AI systems, we have to consider, how do you grok all of that?
Yeah.
Because in the use case you were talking about, there's somebody new, like that's super valuable to that person, right? Like think about, for me, the last time I started a new job was a while ago, but I recall the pain. I recall the pain of being new, being anxious, and being like, okay, I know I'm smart, but this is hard, right?
There's a lot going on here.
There's a lot going on here, right? And I can't like be flustered about it either. Like I have to have a plan, etc. So that's one part, which is like giving that context, using AI to communicate that with a person. The second part is sort of like natively the capability. So if you have that context and the AI is the tooling, which is like the capability on top of it, what are the things that it can do for you as a brand new employee at this company, right? Or on this team. So let's use NotebookLM as an example. I can read a summary, I can listen to the audio, I can ask chat questions, right? Never before able to be done. And so this is where it gets really interesting, because now you're like, okay, leveraging that knowledge base with AI capabilities, now you start to get really interesting outcomes. And every day people are teaching us like what they're using the capabilities for. So in some ways, it's like if you provide the capability, people will tell you what they're using it for and where it's effective and where it's not. And then the third piece that I'll say is the creation piece. What are people trying to make from this? And this I think is a very interesting adjacent to the two, which is we always imagine sort of a knowledge base and Q&A, right? Here's all this context. It's a game about trying to bring everything into the AI, letting the AI work with it and making it simpler. But the third piece is actually, with anybody, most naturally, the thing you're ultimately going to do next is make something new. Whether it's a doc that's like, hey, proving my knowledge, here's like my very first insight, right, about like our business or whatever. Here's a deck about my first idea. Here's an email recapping my week. That creation piece is so much more streamlined with AI, right? Especially with those first two things. So that's how I think about it for an enterprise context.
I love that. And I'm going to give you one more question, or maybe we'll get to him, but one more for sure. And this is a little philosophical, but you said something. I shared this with my wife this morning, who's super auditory. I'm so jealous. She can listen to a book and retain it the way that I require reading it and physically note, all that fun stuff. You said something where, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but essentially you said, there's a relationship between all this content that exists in the world and all these different formats, right? There's a tweet, there's a white paper, there's a research report, there's a book, there's a textbook, there's an email, there's what have you, and all these different formats. And you might, as an individual, want to consume different component parts. You might want a synthesis of all of it. But you're today, previous to NotebookLM, of course, you were kind of limited in terms of the content wasn't malleable. And your vision was for this AI to enable a mixer to give more power to the person that's going to consume the thing they want to consume. But lifting some of those constraints is a very powerful thing. Is that accurate? And could you build on that a little bit if it is, or take it apart, of course?
I think I will answer this question with a short anecdote, but I tried to name, we were first called Project Tailwind, we're now called NotebookLM, but in the beginning I tried to name it Remix. And I think it was like a little hard to grok. It was like, remix what, right? Like, oh, there's no music in here, so it's
I like it, by the way. Remix is cool.
I thought remix was perhaps the most succinct way that could describe the vision that I had, 2 years ago. And it goes back to what you were describing, and this is what I tell people. Hey, in the world that we lived in 2 years ago, if somebody gave you a 100-page PDF, that's it. You have to read the 100-page PDF. There is no other such version, right? Unless you paid somebody to transform it for you or something. But this is where, hey, things have really changed. And I feel like I want to look around. I want to like shake people and be like, hey, can you see? Can you see what's happening? That 100-page PDF, right? Oh, you could probably turn it into a video today. Right? You look at all the people that are doing really interesting things with the NotebookLM audio output, and you can see what people want. They're like, oh, here's my 100-slide deck. Go make a video out of it. Here's my 100-page PDF. Go make an audio overview of it. And I think that's the magic.
That you nailed it. That is the magic. And we're at time, unfortunately, which kills me because I would love to keep doing this. But Raiza Martin, I am so grateful for what you built, as are everyone else in the world. And thank you for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Alec, thank you so much for having me.